Hi, panelists. My name is Corey Gross. I use the pronoun she, her. I'm a sociologist and I teach environmental studies. And I've seen some of you on this panel before, and I'm glad to see some folks that I know. So thanks so much for joining us. In the room today, we have mostly students of Introduction to Environmental Studies, but we also have some folks who are juniors and seniors joining us as well. So all across the board. To get us started, could you please just introduce yourself, your preferred gender pronouns, and tell us a little bit about your kind of path after you left school and what you're doing now for your career. And I think what we'll do is we'll pretend we're in a line. So maybe we'll go Fritz, Jack, Amy, Maddie, and Katherine. And we'll just kind of do that order for each question so it's less confusing. Does that sound all right? Okay, so Fritz, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, great. Thanks for having us. I'm a 2001 graduate of St. John's. I'm married to a College of St. Benedict graduate. Pretty traditional couple there. I live in Minneapolis. If any of you want to reach out directly to meet up for coffee or something like that, I'll make that offer early on. So I went to St. John's, graduated in 2001 with a philosophy degree and a minor in Spanish, and I went into the Peace Corps. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Central Panama, which is where I got a real education. Sincerely, you guys are gonna get a great education. But what I mean by that is you really learn how the world works, and you learn what does and does not operate in different populations. Finished up in 2003. I came home, studied for the bar exam, and I worked for a social services organization for a year. And then I went to law school at Drake University in Des Moines. And while I was there, I took a lot of courses in agricultural law and land use law, zoning issues, property law, and environmental law. And it's about the same time that the Midwest was really starting to see a revolution in energy matters. A lot more wind energy was starting to pop up, a lot of big policy pushes around ethanol. So I kind of took it upon myself to focus on those issues. I graduated from law school in 2008, and I took a judicial clerkship with a judge in Rochester, Minnesota. And while I was there, I got my hands on some interesting cases around zoning. That one in particular, one of them that comes to mind was more about ethanol in a facility they were trying to permit in southeastern Minnesota. I finished up my clerkship in 2010, and I took a job with a small wind energy group called Windustry. And I was there and I learned more about the industry there. Just kept working on the same issues, and then I left there and I worked at another organization on farm energy matters. And then I'll fast forward a few years. A couple years after that, I moved into the University of Minnesota, and I'm employed by the University of Minnesota in the College of Extension in a program called CERTS. And there I work actually coincidentally with most of the people on this panel, where we cross paths frequently. There I interface mostly with farmers and landowners and county boards and townships. And lately it's been a lot of schools and other small businesses on a range of energy matters. Primarily it's around solar, sometimes it's around wind energy, although that's more of a mature industry. So I'll leave it at that. So who should go next?
Thank you. Let's go to Jack.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us. Again, same offer as Fritz. We are always open to having coffee or even going out for a beer after work sometimes, just to network and get to know each other. It's a pretty good group of people that are in the energy industry that have all graduated from St. John's, St. Ben's. My career path and education is kind of a different story. My dad was a general contractor. I got my first tool belt when I was about 12 years old. When I was graduating high school, he said, don't get into construction, go to college, learn something, get a job that'll pay the bills on a regular basis. Because, the housing market has its up and downs. So I went to St. Cloud State to start, but had an accident where a broken leg was not a medical excuse, so I failed the semester. So I called up St. John's, went, hey, here's my situation. And they said, yeah, come on over. So I transferred to St. John's, finished up a year and a half at St. John's, took 20 credits a semester. So my social life at St. John's was pretty inhibited, but I did get out once in a while. So that's my story. So when I graduated in 91 with a management finance degree, that was the same time the S&L crisis happened. So there were no jobs in finance or banking to be found. So I got a job as a bill collector, which I hated because it turns into somebody you just don't want to be, right? So I bought a restaurant, ran that for almost 10 years, sold it for more money than it was worth, and ended up bouncing around for a little bit, but I ended up getting back into construction anyway. Through a couple different construction companies, I was one construction was with a granite manufacturer, and he called me in one day during the housing market crisis and said, you're my most expensive employee, I have to let you go. So found myself out of work, and I went, well, I always kind of looked at what was going to make me money and not really what I was passionate about, and I was actually in a position to think about what I really wanted to do with my life, and I went, I want to get into energy. So I went back to school, got an AAS degree in energy technologies, started my own solar wholesale business, and that led to my job at the state of Minnesota as a solar business advisor, and that led to solar finance manager, and now I lead the I guess the team is technically called the Emerging Energy Technologies team, which really kind of is a misnomer. We deal with all energy related subjects, whether it's delivered fuels, propane supply, natural gas. We monitor the truck, more propane delivery trucks on the road, waivers. We look at transmission, battery storage. We're looking at blockchain technology. I'm the solar expert on the team. I have a wind expert on the team, delivered fuels expert on the team. We are in the process of bringing aboard 2 more people, so we'll soon have a team of 8, which is really exciting. The best thing about my job is that it is never stagnant. The industry is constantly changing. It's in constant flux. There's new stuff popping up all the time, and we're solving a lot of really cool problems that affect everybody. It's exciting. So that's kind of a roundabout way of where I got to where I am today. This has been a fun time to be in the energy industry, I guess. So that's my story. Who's next, Amy?
I think so. Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for having us. My name is Amy Fredrigel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a 97 Benny. I was an econ major and environmental studies minor. That was before environmental studies was a major as well. And I'll do the same thing that Jack and Fritz did, which is extend an invitation to talk anytime or email, do a LinkedIn invite, send a note. Happy to help. And that everyone in this, we have kind of a renewable energy networking group and kind of broader alumni group that's involved maybe more broadly in sustainability is probably the umbrella you could call it. And everyone is so generous with their time, and we're always trying to help each other out and help hire and give each other work and give students new opportunities. So I've worked a lot in the energy and agriculture policy space, actually real similar to Fritz. And ended up going to grad school 3 years after St. Ben's out in Washington, D.C. at George Washington for environmental policy and nonprofit management. I had worked a couple years after St. Ben's at a nonprofit called the Isaac Walton League, working on sustainable agriculture and renewable energy. And then I moved back to Minnesota in 2003. I was actually dating a Johnny at the time, long distance. And so that brought me back to Minnesota. And there I did government affairs for quite some time for a business association, primarily in kind of the energy and agriculture world. And then I went and ran a nonprofit that works on tracking renewable energy called MRETS. And then I went and worked for Excel Energy. And one of the things that I wanted to say about my journey is that I went from working for some kind of nonprofit, more advocacy-based organizations that weren't always happy with the utility company for certain things that they did, or were take positions that they took for various reasons, and then went and worked for that utility company. And it was a real great learning experience. And I would really encourage, kind of one of my themes that I've learned over time is to just really try to understand other people's perspectives, other organizations' perspectives. I think it makes the world a better place, makes us all better people. And you never know why people or organizations or businesses make the decisions they do. And until you, what do they say, walk a mile or 100 miles in somebody's shoes, you really don't know, the various reasons and factors why they do what they do. And so just having spent a lot of time in the energy industry, it helped me kind of do a rotation and understand why a power company would do what they do, maybe why organizations or governments at all levels would do what they do. And then from working at Excel, I went and ran an organization called the Sustainable Growth Coalition, which is a lot of Fortune 500 companies headquartered in the upper Midwest that are leaders on sustainability, and larger institutions like the U of M, where Fritz works, and the state of Minnesota, the Metropolitan Council, just thinking about all of the systems that come together from energy, water, land use, transportation, food, the broader economy, housing, and all of the different aspects of society and the economy that are connected, and how important it is to leverage one and versus the other to get some of the societal outcomes that we're working on. So think climate and race, things that not one entity or human being or state or government or company can really tackle on their own. And so I like to think about those big picture things. And the last thing I'll say about my journey after St. Ben's is where I am now, which is at an engineering, design, and consulting firm called WSB. I just started here in February to help grow kind of all things sustainability related, which includes renewable energy. And we work with governments of all levels and companies of all different types to help bring together solutions that advance their goals. And as you know, increasingly, those goals are sustainability related. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? Good, okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Maddie Norgard. I use she, her pronouns. Definitely take up Amy, Fritz, and Jack on their offer. They've made a huge difference in my career. And currently I'm based in Wyoming, but in Minnesota for the next couple months. So also happy to grab coffee while I'm in town. So I was a part of the CSB class of 2015. I was an environmental studies major. And after I graduated, I started with the Minnesota Green Corps program, which is an AmeriCorps program run by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So I was with a nonprofit called Great Plains Institute, and I was working on local energy issues, actually with Fritz at the Clean Energy Resource Teams. And then after my AmeriCorps service, I went to grad school, attended the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and got my master's degree in science and technology policy. And I chose that path just because I was interested in pursuing a career in policy, but actually upon my graduation from the Humphrey School, I ended up getting a job with Mortenson, which is a Minneapolis-based general contractor, and they build a variety of energy technologies, including wind and solar energy. So I started with their wind energy team, and I was working in business development for about a year, trying to build relationships with new clients. But I found myself really hungry to get some real field experience. So I spent 2 years working in Missouri and Montana, running quality control on a couple wind farm projects. It was a really eye-opening experience, and really just became passionate about the wind industry. It is a mature technology, but it's always changing. And it's just a really exciting industry to be in right now. So fast forward to where I'm at today. About a year ago, I joined a small wind energy development shop called Triple Oak Power. They were founded early 2020, so right as the pandemic started. And a few executives from Avangrid Renewables, which is a big renewable energy firm based out of Portland, Oregon. 3 of their top executives decided to leave the company and start their own business. So we're based out of Portland, but we have a team that's spread across the country, and we're focused on developing utility scale onshore wind farms pretty much west of the Mississippi. So I work on all aspects of wind development, from permitting to wind resource assessment to the design, and all the way through executing the engineering and construction contracts. So really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Katherine.
Thanks, Maddie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so like Maddie, I'm Katherine Keller-Miller, and I will jump on board if anyone else wants to get coffee or reach out. Feel free. I know I took Amy up on her offer a couple months ago on that, so that was great. Thank you, Amy. I graduated like Maddie in 2015 from St. Ben's. I was a biology major with minors in econ and Spanish, kind of all over the board. When I graduated, like Maddie, I did an AmeriCorps program, but with the Minnesota Conservation Corps. They have, I think they've renamed it, but they called it their like apprentice program. So it's basically like an internship. And I was placed with the Scott Sloan Water Conservation District and the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. That was a great experience. Would definitely recommend checking out the Conservation Corps. It's a great way to get experience and kind of get your foot in the door. And it looks great when you're trying to get future jobs. So at the end of that summer, I ended up getting hired on by the Watershed District, and I was there for 6 years until earlier this year, actually. My time at the Watershed, I was doing a bunch of different things. So my experience skews more towards natural resources, where a lot of the other folks on this panel are really focused on renewable energy, sort of tangentially involved, but my focus has been more on the straight up biology of, natural ecosystems and whatnot. So watershed districts are kind of a Minnesota thing. They're a local type of local government, and their boundaries are based on the physical watershed of a particular resource. So for example, Minnehaha Creek is a watershed district, and it's based on their boundaries based on the physical boundary of the watershed of Minnehaha Creek. So we're focused on a lot of like surface water quality issues in lakes and streams and that kind of thing. So at the watershed, I had a number of different roles, and what I found is if you work at a small organization, you generally get an opportunity to do a lot of different things because there's not a lot of people. So everyone kind of has to do some of everything. So for me, that was a great learning experience. I got to do some stuff in the field. I got to do stuff with regulation and permitting, with our conservation easements. And then I kind of moved into more of an education, outreach, communications role, and did a lot of our social media, writing press releases, working on outreach for projects, that kind of thing. In addition to, managing some of our smaller restoration projects like shoreline restorations. This summer, I actually made the jump to the private sector, and I now work for Stantec, which is a big environmental engineering consulting firm similar to WSB. the group I joined was formerly part of WENC, which was another similar engineering environmental services firm that just got bought by Stantec. So I'm about 5 months into my new role. I'm an environmental scientist. I do a whole bunch of different stuff, but a lot of stuff with wetlands and wetland permitting, delineating wetlands. I've done some stuff for wind and solar farms. So a lot of that's kind of like the pre-work before the farm gets built. So going and making sure, finding out where the wetlands are at. So hopefully they can be avoided. Or after the wind farms are built, a lot of times there's bird and bat mortality monitoring. So basically walking around and looking for the dead birds and bats. So yeah, things have been kind of very broad, but it's been a great experience so far. So that's kind of brief summary of me.
Thank you all very much. So I just have 2 questions, and then hopefully we'll have time to open it up to the students. But so the first one is kind of targeted toward first and second year students. But what skills do employers look for, and how can these students make the most of their college experience? And yeah, Fritz, you can start us off.
Sure thing. I would say the ability to write clearly and succinctly. I do not like long, wordy emails. I like it when people get to the point quickly. And that's, I think, the way you learn how to do that is you learn how to write, and then you edit your writing, and you figure out how to use the right words. I really appreciate people that understand self-direction. So if I give them an instruction, like, here's what I want you to do, I have a really deep appreciation for the interns that have come through our office, Maddie included, who can take a subject matter and be thorough with it and run. And then when they come to a question, they turn around, they ask us. But what I don't like doing is constantly having to kind of manage people or manage the project through them. I don't like that at all. And then I also have a really deep appreciation of just generally being thorough in responses and being kind, like with reaching out with the intent to be helpful. I work for a university, so my job is to educate people on a daily basis. And sometimes I have to deliver them an answer that they don't want to hear. But at a minimum, I'll take the time to explain why this is the answer and, maybe what a different step for that person should be. So probably those things. I mean, above all, it's writing clearly. I also think math is really important. Like I said, I was a philosophy major, but I still kept some technical skills in hand as well. So don't just dismiss math if you're in college. So I'll stop there.
Okay. I just went through the process of interviewing a bunch of people for different positions. And I think one of the things that is ultimately important for success are those soft skills. Obviously, yes, you have to be able to write, but you also need to be able to communicate verbally, understanding the perspective of your client, basically. So empathy is a big factor. And like I said, that's one thing I learned at St. John's where I did not get at St. Cloud State, right? At St. Cloud State, here's the information, learn it, pass a test, move on. But the education at St. John's really taught us to approach problems as a problem, right? And think outside the box. Who's going to be affected by this? We do a lot of stuff looking at equity. When we're solving an energy problem, who is this going to affect? Not only initially, but maybe on the back end. What are the unintended consequences? So we have to take all those things into account. So people that can think outside of the box and really communicate with the people that they are working with to understand the different perspectives is vitally important. I can teach you about solar. I can teach you how to write a RFI or anything, but those soft skills, you got to come to the table and got to work work on those soft skills. I think those are probably the two most important.
Yeah,
Amy?
I'll build on and maybe pull on a few threads that Jack threw out there too, which is I like to think about how are things connected and the cross-disciplinary nature. And I think we do a great job in the liberal arts field with that at St. Vincent, St. John's, and siloed thinking is usually not something that we want to do a whole lot of. So just how are things connected and trying to understand whether it's kind of the breadcrumb trail or what is this related to or what is it nested with. And so from how you work to, trying to reach outside of where you working to, Jack mentioned working in advancing equity and inclusion, thinking about what the perspectives of other communities might be, and just, critical thinking and emotional intelligence is really important, and thinking about, the words that you're going to say or write, to Fritz's point about the importance of being a good writer. How are you trying to influence, or how will your message be received by the audience that you're targeting? And did you pick the right message? Do you want a database or science-based message? Do you need to tell some stories and think about trying to, impact people, or maybe you're not trying to change their mind, you're just trying to be a clear communicator, but did you use the right messaging for those audiences? So those are a couple things that I would suggest.
Yeah, and I was going to say something similar, but kind of on a different approach. I would say, it's really good, especially in renewables, to have a passion for climate change and advancing the energy industry. But I think it's also helpful to bring a skill that's a little bit different or related. So, if you're like Katherine and you like the science side of renewables and sustainability, it's helpful to maybe get a minor in biology or get an internship that, where you're doing field work. Alternatively, if you'd like to go into policy and potentially work for a government entity, it might be helpful to get a policy degree. So I think, it's really good to have a passion for sustainability and all the skill sets that come with a liberal arts education, but then really think about how you uniquely want to approach environmental sustainability issues and really dive into something that might give you additional skills for the job market.
I definitely agree with everything that everyone has said before. Fritz stole my answer right off the bat. I was going to say, writing is super important. I did a lot of writing in my last job for a number of different audiences. So keep that in mind. I mean, I did both scientific writing and report writing, but then I was also doing writing for a public audience for like press releases to the local newspaper or fact sheets to go to the neighbors that this project was going to be close to their house. So, like Amy said, being clear about communicating, like, why are we doing this project? What is it going to do? Why should you care about it? Being able to write clearly and well is going to both help you communicate your message well, and it's just a strong skill that employers and your coworkers will appreciate. And then, like Jack said, those soft skills are really important. I know when we were hiring interns at the watershed, especially when you're doing internships, but also once you get on to, quote unquote, real jobs, you need those soft skills. And like the internships, you don't necessarily expect people to come in with experience. That's what the internship is for. A lot of my technical experience, it built on the classes I took at St. Ben's, but a lot of the technical knowledge I have, like plant ID and that kind of thing, I learned on the job. So that's where internships can be really helpful, which I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times already. Listening is really important. I think Amy kind of was hinting at that. At the watershed, we worked with a lot of landowners, and some of them weren't necessarily happy with some of the things we were doing. So, you just have to be a really good listener, hear them out, kind of repeat back what they said to you. And then normally by the end of the conversation, you can hopefully understand their perspective a little better, and they can understand your perspective as well, and where you're coming from. When you have opportunities, internships and jobs and that kind of thing, be curious, be open to learning new things, and be open to feedback too. Most people want to help you, learn new things, improve, get better at your job. And so be open to learning new things and moving forward. In school, take a variety of classes. I took a bunch of science classes. But I wasn't just focused on one thing. I took biology classes, I took chemistry classes, I took environmental studies classes, and then you guys heard my minors. I went over and took Spanish and econ. So all those, you never really know what class is going to be like the most helpful until you get where you're going, right? I actually have been really grateful for my FYS, my first year seminar class, which I think is now called something different. But that class, the professor I had helped us be even better writers. And he taught a really concise, to the point writing style that was super helpful in my last job. And I was very grateful to have had him as a professor, because I was like, wow, I didn't know how useful this was going to be until I needed it. So sometimes you don't even know what's going to be useful until you use it and need it.
Thank you. I think you all covered, my other question was going to be about being attractive on the job market, but I think you covered a lot of important points on that. So I think I'll just open it up to students here because we have about 20 minutes left. So any questions that you all have for our panelists?
Yeah, here I can start us off. You guys have all been in the energy or the renewable industry for a little while now. Do you see the job market growing at all, or like skills necessarily changing that are needed for the future?
You can all hear that?
Did you say that the job market isn't growing, and what?
Yeah, do you guys see it growing, and like what do you think are going to be the most in-demand skills?
It's absolutely growing. Everyone's in this big hiring war right now, and it's impossible to hire. So you guys are set up for any range of industries here. It's just a lot of people I know in leadership positions, we just spend a lot of our time trying to figure out how to hire talent at all levels. And so, for the world, I think this is a really good sign, because that means that renewable energy, sustainability, environmental issues, the job prospects are growing. So we're putting money in things that are really good for the world. And I think, we've covered a lot of ground on this panel already for the various skill sets. I think what you're good at and what you enjoy is the sweet spot. So trying to find jobs that leverage those two aspects of your life, and trying to figure out, you have to poke around and figure out, try some things, and maybe you realize, I don't really love this aspects of the job, or in my next role, I want to try to move more into doing this or that, and that'll help you find that sweet spot.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think I was just listening to a podcast the other day where they said there were currently 11 point something million jobs in the renewable energy sector globally, and they expect that to reach 42 million in the next 10 years. So there are huge growth opportunities really here right now. It is kind of a gold mine situation. We are having a hard time filling a lot of positions, but I think what that means is that eventually there's going to be market corrections along the way. Jobs are going to shift a little bit, especially as technology changes. So like Amy said, don't be afraid to think you have to get that perfect job right out of the gate, right? It is constantly changing. I've been in the energy sector for 10 years. I think I'm in my 4th position. It's moving around a little bit, but always getting better. right? So there's lots of opportunity out there. Passion really is the key. You find something you love to do, but you got to have a tangible skill set to bring to it, whether that's HR, legal, GIS, whatever it is. Have a skill that actually means something to the employee, your passion.
I just want to advertise too that Triple Oak Power is hiring a business development analyst right now. So perfect opportunity to get in on the ground level if you're interested in joining a wind energy development team.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing. I think Jack and Amy are spot on. The federal infrastructure bill is going to roll out a host of changes in renewable energy and generally sustainability. I think you'll see that. I do want to say, at least during our time, we've seen markets crumble and rebuild and crumble and rebuild. And the one thing I do want to point out is that having a liberal arts degree is a good defense against those market shifts. And what it does is it enables your ability to adjust and flex and relearn different processes and actually, pivot to the next technology. Kind of one of the running jokes that the solar industry has is they call it the solar coaster, because when a tax incentive goes away, all of a sudden you'll see thousands of job layoffs, and then the tax incentive might come back and then it picks up again. And so a lot of that is really dependent on policy. I think generally the panel would agree that we are getting much smarter and policy is much more stable in terms of sustainability and clean energy. So, but I do want to point that out. It's, aim for the best, a liberal arts degree will prepare you for the worst. So.
Okay, Katherine, did you want to go or?
I don't think I had too much to add, although I'll jump on Maddie's train. I believe Stantec, I think our water team is hiring some summer interns right now. So if anyone's interested, check that out.
Thank you. Other questions from students? Sean.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My question is, so I'm a junior and looking at postgrad opportunities, maybe going straight into the job corps, maybe doing one of the service corps, whether that's BBC, Green Corps, Peace Corps, all of the corps, or maybe even going to grad school. Do you all have any suggestions or any advice on paths to take?
I heard somebody, I did this policy fellowship at the Humphrey Institute, and I could tell I was ready to change jobs. I'd been at a role for 6 or so years, and somebody suggested that I map out what my dream jobs were. And, depending on what time scale you're interested in, 5 years or 50 years out, and then start to think about there's lots of different ways to get to those dream jobs, and then evaluate the choices in front of you in those scenarios based on the likelihood, to Fritz's point about just, having a diverse portfolio, because you never know what's going to happen in the markets. Think about, will the various paths give you more opportunities towards, a dream job or jobs that you're seeking.
Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would jump in and say I haven't been to grad school, but I would say a lot of the courses can be, they might not pay amazing, but they're great experience. You'll get a lot of really valuable experience. And as you know, some of them, if you've got loans or you're still in school, a lot of them have education awards that you can apply towards that. So that's kind of a nice bonus, but they're great experience. They, when we were hiring people at the watershed, if I saw someone with, Green Corps or Conservation Corps experience, it's like, okay, I know that they have some solid experience in this field. Like, that looks good. And I forgot where I was going with the rest of my thought, but, grad school, I haven't been to grad school, so maybe some other people can speak to that a little better, but I think it's not necessarily bad to go to grad school right out undergrad, but on the flip side, I think it can be valuable to gain some experience first, instead of going to grad school and then employers are like, well, you have a master's degree, but you don't have any experience. And like I mentioned earlier, like I learned a lot of my technical skills on the job. So that experience is really important for my skill development. So just something to keep in mind.
Okay. I think I would add, I think I'm the only one on the panel that didn't do an AmeriCorps or Peace Corps because of my gap in college when I broke my leg. Loans aren't forgiven while you're in the Peace Corps, so I needed income. But in looking, you want to go to grad school, I would suggest getting some field experience first, because a lot of times your employers will help you pay for the grad school. I know the state does. We have a tuition reimbursement program. I know a lot of other companies have tuition reimbursement programs. So kind of get that experience, make sure it is something you're passionate about, and then go on and get the education and do it through your employer.
Yeah, I'll add one more comment. I just want to acknowledge the privilege if you have the ability to go and volunteer somewhere for a year or two. You know, some of your friends in school might not have that financial privilege. I can tell you the way it panned out for me is I went to the Peace Corps and I came back when I applied to law school. I got a full service. I got a full tuition scholarship to go to law school. So it depends on how you think about the dividends of your service. I think everybody said it's good to get experience. You know, I was getting paid like maybe $10 a day in the Peace Corps. So, and I was living off of beans and rice, and that's probably the skinniest I've ever been. But, you know, those life lessons are critical, and that experience and how to navigate through, you know, a foreign country, for example, I think are transferable skills. But I do want to acknowledge that privilege that I have the ability to put my student loans on hold for a couple of years. I would also say that's probably one of the only times in your life when you're able to do that. I now have, my wife and I now have 4 kids, and going anywhere is a challenge. So I'll leave it at that.
Other questions? Let's see, this was a question from a previous year that I liked. So how do you keep up with all the changes in your field? Because like you said, you know, it is so rapidly changing. So what is that like? What are the challenges and joys of that?
Okay, I'll go first on this one. Yeah, it is constantly changing. You read a lot of reports, go to a lot of meetings, listen to podcasts. Like, this is my first day being vertical. I threw out my back. I've been laying on my back for the last 3 days. I don't know if it's, I'm just pacing the floor, listening to podcasts about energy markets. That's what you do. You read, you try to stay on top of things, you go to seminars, but it is constantly changing. And I think the most important part is to kind of think about, listen for where the market is indicating things are going to go. Like, we're really starting to look at blockchain technology as being kind of one of the future things that the energy market's going to need. Not yet, you know, it's probably 10 years in the future, but we know it's going to come. So we start paying attention well ahead of time so we can stay ahead of the curve. Just, you're always interested. You're always looking for new data.
And I think one of the things to think about, and we've touched on this too, is everyone has their strengths and interests and how you want to contribute. And so you have to prioritize. You can't read it all. You can't watch it all. You can't go to every conference, every event, read every book, every white paper. And so think about at this point of time and maybe where you see yourself going, where do you see yourself shining, and when are you at the top of your game, and then drill down on some of those things. And also try to understand how it's nested in the broader environment so you don't have this tunnel vision. whether so then you're not blindsided by a market impact, to Jack's point. So if you want to be a specialist in a certain area, maybe Katherine is, a specialist in the field and she's doing certain things, and Maddie is too in her work. I'm more of a generalist, and I've worked at a lot of smaller organizations where I've covered a lot of ground, and I really like kind of having a lot of skill sets that are complementary and being able to kind of see the big picture and how things fit together. And some people love to get really, really specific. So it's thinking about how you want to contribute, and then get really good at that and try to learn a lot about those things, and it'll change over time too.
That's great advice, Amy. I was going to say also networking. So we have this, a lot of us, I think all of us are sometimes go to, there's an environmental, what am I looking for? Environmental CSB, SJU grad group, alum group that gets together for happy hour every so often. And a lot of the folks in that group are really focused on wind energy or renewable energy. And I'm, as I mentioned, kind of more tangentially related to that, but it's nice to go and network with people that are in an area that's not quite, what I'm focused on, to kind of hear what else is happening. So I feel like whenever I go to the happy hours, I learn something new, because I'm like, oh, I haven't heard about that yet. Like, what's this new thing that's happening? So just networking and talking with different people can also be a helpful way, in addition to just keeping up with the news and that kind of thing.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball. So there's any number of aggregate news sites that you can sign up for, but I found actually for the long-term thinking is reading books. I was going to mention a book called The Wizard and the Prophet, to kind of think about like your generation. What are they looking at, 30, 40 years out? Like, how do you approach the problems that we're facing? What is the philosophy? No, I'm a philosophy major, but do you take a technical position, or do you take a moral position, or do you take a blend of both? So The Wizard and the Prophet has some Minnesota connections if it's worth your time. Another one that I'm reading right now, it's kind of a popular book. It's called Think Again, which is about how to have difficult conversations and to get people to open up. It's a really poignant section in there about climate change and skeptics, and how people get put in one camp or the other camp when it's actually more of a spectrum, and how do you work through those issues. So I think it's like Jack said, it's a combination. I do everything these people do. I listen to podcasts, I read the emails and the aggregate news sites, and I also have a short list of books that I really like as well. So across all those, I think the point is you just have to consume, and you have to carve out time to dedicate your focus to specific things, but just consume. I mean, you guys are smart. You're in college. So.
Well, we have just 5 minutes left, and so I think, do we have any pressing questions? I've got one. So we're living in very challenging times, right? I know a lot of us here, like living through COVID, managing school and work and all the other activities folks are doing. What's your advice for being happy and kind of managing your work and your life during this moment?
Stay connected, and I've really enjoyed the benefits of the spaciousness of time when a lot of things were canceled and we had different patterns, the ability to connect with folks that were across the country or across the world that you would have thought of as not being front and center for you. And I've just mentioned that I need to run to another meeting, and so I'm going to have to drop off here, but thank you so much for the chat, and please let us know how we can help out. Have a good day.
Thank you.
I exercise a lot. I ran a half marathon on the 30th. I get an endorphin kick from going outside and running around or doing stuff like that. So I'll admit, like I had we had all 4 of our kids home last year during COVID, and managing them and then managing my own meetings was a really high point of stress in my life. So what I would do is I would take an hour and I go run on, just go out for a run and kind of break through my stress and frustration, and come back with a nice fresh reset. So hit the trails. I mean, you guys have a beautiful campus.
Yeah, definitely. Get out in the Arboretum on both campuses. It's so gorgeous. I love to get back up there anytime I can. No big surprise here. I also like to get outside, and I also like to run. But I think it's a great opportunity that we've had here, where if you're fortunate enough to have time to focus on that, evaluate what you do like to do, what provides value to you, and what are things that you're like, you know what, I actually don't love this that much, and this isn't providing as much benefit as maybe some other things, and prioritize what really works for you and makes you happy. So I think there's always upsides and downsides to everything, and one upside of the last 2 years is it's kind of given people a reason to refocus and reflect and think on what matters to them.
Maddie?
Yeah, I'll just add that, I do think the world of work is changing, and right now my company is primarily working remote, and I will admit it's been pretty hard, just socially, coming from a company like Mortensen, where I got to go to lunch with my friends, and it was social all day long. And so I think, for the juniors and seniors in the room, I think that's something that you should factor into your decision making on what step to take next, and try to seek out opportunities where there are more in-person interactions. I think it's really critical when you're starting your career to have that in-person mentorship. And so, looking at opportunities that offer maybe a hybrid approach or some more in-person, or maybe looking at opportunities where you're working outside to start off your career, just so you do get that mentorship. And when you're working remotely, you can't just, go over to your boss's desk and ask a question. So I would say, consider that when you're making a decision on your next step.
Okay, and for me, my job is in the metro area, but I live in St. Cloud. So COVID has actually been awesome for me. I'm saving 3 hours a day, not in my car. So like I get out to St. John's, hike probably 2 or 3 times a month. I hike the trails along the Mississippi River. My vacations are in the woods. I hike the border route this spring. For me, it's getting out in nature and just having that time to reflect, but also in what Madeline was saying, you do have to find that connection and that balance. So we have, and every afternoon we have a coffee hour. We do 1 hour every Friday. Everybody gets on a Zoom call and you can't talk about work. We also do a once a month, a social hour, a Zoom social hour. We sit on our decks and we just chat and have a cocktail and make sure we keep that connection. It is different. I think it's going to continue to be different. I don't expect that my team will ever be back in the office. We will be remote going forward, mostly because most people are generally happier. And we actually calculated just our gas savings was like 16 cubic tons of carbon a year or something like that from not commuting. So it is a different work environment, but you got to find what works for you. It's going to be different for everybody.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. we hope you have a great rest of your day and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful panel, wonderful.
Good seeing you guys again. See you at the next event.